So yeah, so super excited to have Annalie Barriera Iriheta, who's a housing coordinator for Weston King Neighborhood Center. Um, I'll just go into a little bit of her bio. Annalie has worked with Weston King Neighborhood Center as a housing coordinator for almost 4 years now. She started life in the Bloor and Lansdowne area of Toronto. As she traveled about, soon became aware of the local sex workers and drug dealers. Her father explained what they were doing. She also saw the police walking the streets and decided she wanted a career as a corrections officer. Annalie has set herself and goals, a timeline, and hopes to see her career dreams come through true in her 30s. But for now, she's happy and a mother of a 6-year-old son. Annalie heads a team of one other young lady who works at finding suitable shelter and stabilizing their unit, preventing evictions, and so on. One of their big challenges is relationship building with local landlords. There is a growing recognition of Annalie's skills, and she's frequently called upon to speak to other agencies and has special cases referred to her. She is very dedicated to finding the best solution for each person's who comes to her office and still has to learn that she cannot take on the full responsibility of people's lives. It needs to be shared. Good night, Annalie. How are you doing?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Brandon, for inviting me to this special talk.
Awesome. So I've worked with Annalie in the capacity for the last 4 years when I was working over at Building Up, and she was like a staple. Like, you know, I used to do I was a manager of training there. And one of the issues that I saw with a lot of our participants, a lot of our participants were working in, like living in shelters or couch surfing, and recognizing that it was hard for someone to really focus on the career if they didn't know where they're sleeping. And also depending on where that individual or what kind of shelter there was. You know, I worked in a shelter for a time being, and recognizing that I saw some folks who worked in the trades, but it was difficult because some shelters, you have to get, you're not, your bed is not guaranteed every night, you know? So folks would have to carry their stuff, and that was difficult. And then these are like difficult factors. So I'm just gonna jump into it. Can you just first talk about what are your roles and responsibilities as housing coordinator?
Yeah, that's a good point, and hopefully we'll elaborate on that later. But my role at Weston King Neighborhood Center, I've been the senior housing worker for this center for 4 years, a career of now almost 7 years. So my duties there is to provide housing help. We are a small not-for-profit organization, so I am the go-to, the outreach person, the case manager. I help do everything from finding market rent housing to applying for subsidized housing, so the typical common names, right, that we know of: housing connections, government housing, subsidy co-op. All that is all one organization that you can apply to all of them. I help do that. We help also make referrals for financial assistance, for employment. Just like how I met with Brandon, that was a big step. Like you mentioned, there was a lot of people coming into the drop-in saying that they're at the shelter, they work full-time, but because most shelters have curfews and you can only set and ask for certain extensions of curfews, it became an obstacle. So that's what I do at Weston King Neighborhood Center.
Okay, what are some of the issues people are finding when it comes to getting affordable housing in Toronto?
Well, unfortunately, as we all aware of, the market rent is extremely high in Toronto. So rent itself, there is no set amount. Landlord can charge for a new tenant. So that becomes a really big problem. It becomes a problem for newcomers. We've seen a lot of newcomers coming in the last 4 years pretty much. And so not having reference, a backup right, to represent yourself is becoming a big issue, right? And then just because I work in a drop-in environment, I also work with the marginalized population. So people who have substance abuse or mental health abuse is a real big problem, because usually they kind of sometimes need a representation to accompany them when they're meeting their new landlords.
How has COVID-19 impacted people finding affordable housing in Toronto?
So with the COVID-19, there are many who are very stigmatized of what's happening. You know, it's a very serious situation because it is happening worldwide. And so because of that, people are not able to go and view the units, right? Let alone it's very difficult for them to agree over the phone, but everyone has to go and check out the units and their spot that they're going to be renting to see if it accommodates their needs. So right now with the self-isolation is very difficult for someone to really make that decision whether they want to rent it out to someone new or if someone really wants to go and move in with someone new.
Okay, Adeline, I'm going to ask you to slow down a little bit. I'm not sure if it's, to slow down a little bit. So you also mentioned, like, one of the other issues is around, like, say, housing connection, which we'll talk a little bit more, that a lot of folks are not able to actually process some of these applications because folks from the city have moved to different.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Exactly. So unfortunately, for many of you who are familiar with housing connections or the new term access to housing, their general line and their main office at 176 Elm Street is closed. Their number is not available. Their office is closed. So any applications right now are really being standstilled and being processed. Although they mentioned that they are reviewing and processing special priority applications, many of their workers, managers, processors are being shifted to shelters and respite centers, right, to cover the city right now during the COVID-19. So it's very difficult for them to even process a simple request to add a second member of your family on your list, or even to make simple modifications of unit preferences. Therefore, it's very important for one to have an account online to do these things. But even if right now with the line being unavailable, sometimes it's better to have, or like myself, I prefer someone to speak to you over the phone just to confirm that everything is okay. Right now, that's not available for clients. So it's my duty to have some connections with some workers who are in the arrears department, or managers of some of the offices who are able to help me with some applications that are pending that I'm kind of worried and concerned about, and they'll be able to get back to me. So it's always important to have a housing worker or someone supporting you when you're doing your applications, or if you're going to do an application, just so there's someone kind of mediating for you.
Okay. And are there certain times of the year people have more opportunities to find affordable housing? And I'm going to ask you, you're doing a great job, first of all. I'm going to ask you to slow down and make sure you're breathing. I feel like you're not breathing over there. So I want you to slow it down and just, we're here for you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You know what? Truth be told, there isn't a great time. It's always kind of difficult to find housing, whether it be market rent, whether it be trying to apply for subsidy housing. I mean, I would say obviously the best time is kind of when the weather gets nice, right? When you're able to walk and search yourself and, be able to make appointments during the day for you to go see the apartments, right? Because without you seeing it, it's very difficult. But right, and you have to be considerate of that. It's gonna take time, so you have to be able to have some time. You can't be really working. A lot of people are working from 9 to 5, right? So having that time set aside when it's nice outside to really prepare yourself to go out and do the apartment hunting.
So I came across this housing continuum And it says it starts off, and this is not obviously not everyone's situation, but it's homelessness, then emergency shelters, then supportive transitional housing, social housing, affordable renting housing, affordable home ownership, market rental housing, and then market home rentership. Is this still the case in Toronto in 2020?
Believe it or not, in a way, yes. People still our goal, everyone's goal at least, is to have their own property, right? So, however, with this, there are those people who are in shelters and won't be able to find an accommodation as soon as they're able to, right? But yes, some people do kind of follow into that line, and it's very important for you to find and resource yourself, because there's a lot of benefits of being on for example, on a housing application, access to housing list. If you're on the waiting list, you benefit a lot, and I can speak more into what the requirements are in order for you to apply for it. But yeah, there is. It still kind of continues, Brandon. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I can't hear you. I think your microphone is off.
Yeah, thank you. So can you talk a little bit about the requirements that's needed? You just kind of touched on just now.
For housing connections, yeah. So a simple housing application, which I prefer completing online, because they automatically give you your reference number, as opposed to filing paper, where it can take up to 6 months for you to get a response. But the requirements are fairly basic. You are submitting proof of status, landed status, pending status, permanent residence card, citizenship of Canada, and you have to be 16 years of age or older. So I think it's a very ideal age. It's kind of in the midst of, figuring out what your future holds, and then having the opportunity. That's a big opportunity, because if you add yourself, if you're a family and you have children who will become are 16 years of age, right? And then let's say by 18 they want to move out on their own, right? They're already on your original application, right? So if they decide to leave your apartment, right, and leave their family, they can always call in or ask their housing worker to separate yourself from the main applicant. And if your mother has been on the list for over 10 years and you're splitting yourself after those 16, 17, 18, 4 years, when you move out, you'll be able to sustain those 10 years that you were in the application with your mother, and so that's a very good thing. And that's where a lot of young youth don't know and don't realize the benefits, right? As opposed to also, there are also for, Brandon was, I assume, Brandon, that the age requirement for this program as well, the entrepreneurship program, has opened as well, just like it was at Building Up, where there isn't really an age restriction.
We work so at TCBN, we work with folks who are pretty much, 18 and older, but then we even work with some younger folks who are in the OYAP program, for example, right?
Nice.
So, but for the most part, folks are 18 and older. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. So going to that point, there for some females who become young mothers, being part of the access to housing list allows you to also benefit from transitional housing that are mandated for young mothers, young new mothers. So it's very beneficial, and a lot of people don't know that a simple application could help you in the future, right? So going back to the requirements, just proof of status, 16 years of age, and as long as you don't have no deportation order criminal evictions of not allowing you to live in a home, you'd be fine. If you have renter arrears from a previous housing unit, as long as you have a planned payment plan, then you'll be fine. But it's a very simple application. It takes 5 minutes to do online, and it's worth the wait. It's really worth the wait.
Okay, so on the flip side of the last question that I asked, are there certain times of the year people have less opportunities to find affordable housing?
Affordable housing. What do you mean by affordable housing?
Or just okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I mean, less opportunity to find housing in general, whether it's market rent or
housing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think what I've seen, just because right before school begins, right, and right like at the end of the beginning of the year, so like come end of January, come mid September, that's I think the peak point where it's best to start planning or start looking for a place. Yeah, absolutely, because there's a lot of students, a lot of shared accommodations, a lot of people, coming into, like I said, the rent increase starts for the new calendar year. So that's when the landlords are kind of, searching for new tenants.
If someone is planning on moving from their current home, what documents should they get in order before they move?
Right. So at this moment, I think still people are keeping up with the same documents, right? You have to remember that there's no obligation to put down your SIN number. Anyone can check your credit score by your name and last name and your address, pretty much. There's free credit apps for you to even check your credit before you even try and put in a basic application for a private building. A great one that I use and I recommend, which is free, is Credit Karma. But you're looking at bringing in your following documents, like a proof of employment letter, or at least a source of income that has been stable for the last 6 months, a reference letter, hopefully from your previous landlord. And if you don't have one, it could be from a worker, someone that knows your personality and your reputation, right? That backs you up. And at this moment, it's all about documents. You know what? I've seen those two, the main ones, employment and financial, right? I always give you my card. I give my clients my card. I always try to go with you to your appointment, to see the property, to speak with you, just so you have that support. But as long as I guess you're able to give them someone's reference, they really like that. And of course, if you're able to have it right there on the spot, a money order, right, for the amount that you're going to be paying, which is like first month, and a deposit, which should be no more than what your rent is.
And how have you been supporting your clients right now during COVID?
So right now during COVID, I am working from home because, my son is at school. So I'm becoming a teacher, which is not at all my career. But with that, we have been given our direct line. So I do now have a direct line with a different cell phone where clients who are in need are able to contact me. My drop-in does provide meals and dinner every day, Monday to Saturday. And we have been planning to provide like an essential COVID-19 kit that we're going to start implementing hopefully for the summertime, and where we're going to kind of like assess our clients and see what it is they need in order to stabilize their current housing, whether it be, not spending so much on food, so we can help them with support for food, so they just can focus on paying their rent, or like right now there isn't no evictions happening, and I'm assuming that they're going to roll over that that rule from April that no evictions, no court hearings are happening until May and until this finishes, right? So we're supporting them by they have access to me every day, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. The number has not been distributed to everyone per se, just because it is kind of for those who are in need, but they are still able to contact us through the main line, the Weston King Neighbourhood Center line. And if they do want to speak to me, I will call them back, no problem. Your mic is up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So what do you mean by stabilizing your current housing situation before moving?
So stabilizing your housing, right? So making sure that you have enough money to pay your rent. Everyone's main concern should always be about your rent, because coming from the community organization that I come from, food is not an issue. Food shouldn't be an issue, right? We are able to provide you with hygiene kits, food, clothing, bedding, help for furniture costs, so we're stabilizing you that in order for you to just kind of focus on paying your rent, or at least help you focus on helping you pay your rent, whether it be going through the rent bank or, speaking with your landlord to tell them that you won't be able to pay your rent. But everything else, we'd be able to help you, right? So it's very important for someone to know that everything else is okay. And, we'd be able to help you stabilize that, because even in eviction, is preventable. All evictions are preventable, right? So yeah.
And what are the welcome home kits your agency provides individuals?
Yeah, so the welcome home kits is something I started about almost literally since I was at this organization, so 4 years now, where when you're being housed, whether it be from an offer from Housing Connections or through market rent, I put together a welcome home kit of essential items that maybe you might forget to purchase when you move in, whether it be the shower curtain linen or the toilet plunger or a few cleaning supplies, something to get you started into and so that you can make your new place your home. Right, so now we're kind of going to the second phase now and planning for the essential COVID-19 kits.
Okay, so you kind of touched on the essential home kits and the difference of the home kits. So, I came across this. I think my question is: Is Toronto affordable? I was looking. I think we're number 2 in terms of the cost, second to Vancouver. Like when you look at these images here, or this image, what does it tell you? What does it say to you?
It's very scary. I honestly think this is a big awakening call for the province to realize that even with their SERV benefit, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, it's still tight. You're still they don't realize it, and a lot of new condos are being built, and their prices are very high. However, their units are also going to be available for subsidized units, right? So like I said, it's very important, if you don't already have an application to access to housing, to put one in, because there's these new buildings. I just passed by one near Jane and Shepherd, beautiful building that's going to be built. They're trying to change the area. No problem in doing that, but at least it's giving more opportunity. The whole building should be subsidized at least, right? But they're not eliminating that possibility, right? Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the resources people can utilize who are planning on looking for housing? So you kind of touch on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. So resources. So the housing program at Weston King provides weekly lists. We make our own lists every week. We compile lists from other resources, from EYT, from Viewit, from Kijiji. I also like to use one of my local Hispanic newspapers, where there's a lot of rental advertisements available, and so I provide them every list for people who come to the center. I am also able to email it out to anyone who's interested, and this is also a good opportunity so that you can see what's available, right? Right now, because of the COVID-19, I'm not able to meet one-on-one with the individual. However, I do cold calls, and I can set up appointments so that you can go and see the unit. But it's very important to realize that there are listings out there, and if, like I said, because of this job, you're not able to call because you're working during those times, you let us know, and we'll be cold calling for you, letting them know that someone's interested, they've been working with you, they're able to come and see you if you give them a time, and, they're being representative with good faith.
And you kind of touched on it before, but for folks who may came late, but what are the strategies some strategies for looking for housing during COVID-19?
Some strategies looking for housing during COVID-19. Well, right now, like I said, the housing lists are still available. They're still happening. So I think it's still important for you to plan, for you to be, ready to go meet any potential landlords who are willing to come and meet with you, but to make the cold calls. If you can't make it, let someone, a professional, make them for you. It's very important for you to reach out to them, because people need to pay their rent. People need to charge their rent. There's a lot of hungry landlords right now. But it's being very mindful that any new tenants coming in will be charged whatever the landlord wants, because there isn't no rental cap right now, right, for new tenants.
So just to be clear, so someone could be in a unit paying $1,400, for example, for a 2-bedroom, and then I come in and move in, and they can charge me $1,800.
Absolutely. You can move out this month, be paying $1,450 for a 2-bedroom, which is, believe it or not, perfect at least. And then the new tenant starting in June will be paying up to $2,000, right, for that, only for rent, right? And then that can include separately parking. It could include separately hydro, right? And then there's programs that can help you pay if you are paying hydro separate. There are programs available for you to get a subsidy to pay and cover your hydro.
Okay. What are some important rights tenants should know?
I think a main one that some people forget or aren't aware of, especially in the trades, is because you might be right now only available to pay for a shared accommodation, right? So a shared accommodation, it being sharing a kitchen or a bathroom, right? So when you're sharing an accommodation with a landlord, you are unfortunately not covered under the rental tenant agreements, right? So you unfortunately do not have any rights against the landlord. Any arguments, they're able to, kick you out. If you're sharing accommodations with them, they're also, if you're in a hotel, in a motel, or in a seasonal housing, you don't have any rights. So it's very important for you to know that before you move in, because you always want to have an accommodation that you're able to at least be able to represent yourself in court against an issue, right? And just I guess the simple that even when you're in your unit, no one is allowed to come into your property without 24-hour notice unless of an emergency of a flood or fire. And and then your unit is your unit. You have to maintain your unit, and Yeah, the basic is pretty much to share the rights under the rental tenant agreement. A lot of my clients didn't really know that, right? And they complain with their roommates or shared accommodation, but unfortunately, there isn't anything that supports you.
So if I see an ad in Kijiji, for example, and saying that they're looking for a roommate or to, get a room, there's no protection for me as that person who gets that room, basically.
No, not at all. Especially if you're sharing with a landlord, right? You can be sharing that room with another roommate who isn't the landlord, right? Then it becomes with the property, right? Then you can take the landlord. But if the landlord is living upstairs, well, no, if the landlord is living upstairs and he has his own kitchen and washroom, then you're fine if you're renting the basement. But if the landlord is coming downstairs to use your kitchen, then unfortunately, no, you do not.
What should someone do if their landlord gives them an eviction notice?
So eviction notices are very common. Landlords like to give out N4s and N-forms, right? N4s, N5s, and a lot of eviction notices are very clear. Usually in an eviction notice, it will tell you that you're gonna have a hearing, that you're gonna be going to court, the reasons why they want to evict you. Sometimes the landlord might try to scare the tenant and say that you are required to move within 7 days. A lot of these issues can be resolved. No one is obligated to leave their unit unless a sheriff has an order to come and change your locks, right? And even if that does happen, sorry, I kind of smell smoke, but no, my stove shouldn't be on. Even if that happens, it could still be preventable, and you need to get legal advice, right? There's absolutely no way you can, even if the landlord tells you are to leave by the end of the month, but you've never seen a court order, you've never seen a hearing date, you are not obligated to leave your unit.
Okay. Are you finding a lot of people taking housing that they cannot afford?
Unfortunately, it's not that the problem is not that we can't afford it. It's just that it's what the housing is. Most of the people, I myself, cannot afford it, right? I've been lucky enough to have, I think if I wasn't able to have the subsidy for my hydro, I'd be even more tighter than what I am. This program, the OESP, Ontario Energy Savings Program, is a great subsidy. Anyone, even a property owner, can apply to, and they can get a credit from $25 up to $65 every month for your hydro bill. I haven't paid my hydro in over 2 years, and that's $60 that I save, that I put in my pocket for gas, right, or toys, right? But it's a great benefit, and it's there, right?
Okay, you kind of jumped to one of my questions here. You're stealing my thunder here. So, I wanted to talk about just like in terms of the waiting time. Some co-ops have talked about it's 5-10 years and no one is moving, especially from co-ops. But then let's say Toronto community housing, I'm hearing the numbers can be up 10 years plus, I came across this diagram that kind of talked about wait time in terms of years, and it says that the average time, well, Peel is sort of the most or the longest, leading up to 9 years, and Chatham being the less. So does it make that, like, does it is there any wonder why we see more people moving further and further out outside of the GTA?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I would think Toronto is the highest wait time periods, right? You're looking up to, even, believe it or not, 15 to 20 years for a 2-bedroom apartment. And this is why also it's very important that even though you hear these long wait times, if you don't have an application from the get-go, 5 years, which is the starting point for an offer for a bachelor unit, flies by very fast. Although I know and no one will really want a bachelor per se, but depending on your needs, if a bachelor is the only thing available and will kind of give you that sense of tranquility, I guess a bachelor will be perfect, right? But going back to the wait times, yes, the wait times are fairly long. A bachelor unit is 5 to 7 years. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, you're looking at your 14 to 20 years. And for 3 townhouse, 4 bedroom apartment, the same thing, right? The only thing that affects timing are priorities, right? So there are different types of priorities in access to housing. There's priorities of you being under a special priority case, whether it be a victim of abuse, terminally ill, human trafficking, which has been added as of 2017. Those priorities will kind of bump you on the list fairly fast. Another priority that will get you something fast is if you're underhoused or overhoused in a unit, right? Already in a housing unit, right? Which is kind of their kind of description trees, right? So if you're overhoused, meaning that if you used to have a 3-bedroom with your 2 children and your children now moved out and now you're yourself with a 2-bedroom, they will think you are overhoused. So they will start sending you a list of other accommodations where you can now go into a 1-bedroom, right? Or if you're underhoused, you're a family of 7, but you're sharing a 1-bedroom, they'll try to accommodate you fairly fast as well. There's also the disadvantage code, right? So members who are homeless or in shelters, they also get a little bit of a bump up the waiting list. But it's very important for you to mention those main priorities when you're applying for access to housing, right? But keep in mind, though, that if you apply for Toronto housing, you can also apply for Peel housing, Durham housing, York region, right? And I will think Durham, I have seen and I've heard has actually the shortest wait time. So Durham, we're talking about Pickering, Ajax, right? That has a wait time of up to like 3 years, right? But like you mentioned, Brandon, that is fairly far, and it's a long commute, right? But it's something to consider because you don't have to just have one application access.
Do you find that more people are getting roommates or afford housing in Toronto?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and unfortunately, yes and yes, right? I don't, just because my groups, although I help serve all the community members and anyone that's looking for help, a lot of my clients are clients who have substance abuse or mental health abuse, so I don't really help find roommates. However, it is a struggle. It is a struggle because, you don't know who you're renting with, and it becomes an obstacle. It's a big decision, and it's very important for you to take notice of what's happening and if that's really the long-term goal, right?
What are some tips for people who are looking for a roommate to move in with?
Well, first and foremost, you want to make sure that person has a steady income. A lot of landlords don't understand that being on Ontario Works or being on ODSP is I sometimes feel like it's more of a permanent income than someone being employed, right? It's a set amount that comes monthly, directly deposited, and it's up to the workers to cut you off, right? So you don't have to have the hassle of paying that rent yourself, the payments can go directly. So finding someone who has a steady income and knowing the person is very important. Knowing the person and knowing each other's future plans, right? Because if you're gonna thinking of starting a family and you're rooming with someone, you don't want to be the one being kicked out, right? You're looking for someone long term because you're depending on them and they're depending on you, right?
What's interesting, a few months ago, I was looking for an apartment, and I was looking at a 2-bedroom, and I went to do a site visit or visit some units, and I went into one unit, and they had like in both rooms, they had like 7 beds in each room, and they were being shared amongst folks who were sort of. And I thought, I was like, shoot, like that is like a really smart, practical way. I'm not sure if I could do it myself, but that's a really smart, practical way to sort of leveraging the high costs that, that's happening in terms of someone being able to sort of manage that. How common are you seeing where, there's sort of multiple people, in a unit basically?
Oh, very, very common. I work, one of our partners, the Albion Street Outreach Team, they're great at having these private landlords who are owners, condo owners, right, of these properties. There's one, a condo, which I never even knew it was a condo, going up to Jane and Steel, pretty much across the street from the building that was burnt during the summertime, was it? Right? That building, those buildings are owned units. Some are owned units. So I went with these team members, partners of ours, to see this accommodation that they had, where they had 4 rooms, and one of that room they wanted to divide. It was like it was a room that included the balcony, and they wanted to split that large room into 2 and charge 2 separate rents for those 2 rooms kind of ish. But because it was a couple, they're still going to be charging them separately $650 each for a large room. But because they're a couple, they're not going to put a divider. You understand? So yes, these accommodations, some are unfortunately still illegal, and some are just not registered, right? But this is happening very much so, right? And we just have to make sure that at least where they're going, who they're mixed with, also very important, right?
Okay.
But it is happening.
So you talked a bit about the Ontario Energy Saving Program. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what are the various kinds of housing providers in Toronto for folks that may not know?
Right. So when we hear the government housing, right? When we hear of subsidized housing, we kind of just typically go into our government housings, right? And the government housings that we've been familiar with are buildings, if you ever see that are called TCHC, Toronto Community Housing Corporation. That's the common one that everyone kind of sees, and I think that's government housing, right? But no, then you have co-ops, right? Co-op buildings are buildings that are run by board members, right, who live in the building, right? So it's a government run by tenants who become a board, and they're often interested in having their tenants participate in gardening and barbecues and voting, right? Then there are senior mandated buildings where Housing Connections or Access to Housing considers a person a senior at the age of 59 years old, right? And only if you are at that age are you qualified to go into those buildings. There are rent supplement buildings, right, that are strictly to your income rent supplement buildings are buildings that are private buildings and have some subsidized units in them. So for example, the example is one here going up, if it's familiar with the Weston and Finch area.
So Annalie, you're
condos in build
Annie, So,
Weston and Finch. Those condos are new and have some subsidized units in them. Hello?
so yeah, so your screen had paused for a moment, and the sound had, I'm not sure if it's because you're moving around. Okay, so what should tenants know about rental increases for their units? Can you hear me? So, can you hear me? So this is a good time for folks, as Annalise sort of working on her sound. If you have additional questions, feel free to post them into the chat. I believe we lost Annalise. She should be coming back shortly. Oh, here she is. Okay, so yeah, I can. So, Annalise, what should, no, that's okay, man. What should tenants know about rental increases for their units? Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, barely. Do you have your head? Yeah, if you with your headphones, it was a little clearer.
Hello.
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, sorry. Going back to, so those are private buildings that have some subsidized units available, right? Then you have PNP buildings, profit nonprofit buildings that could be mandated buildings for religious circumstances. For example, like there are buildings on it could be religion mandated buildings. There's a Muslim mandated building on Finch and Milvan, approximately. There's another one, an Italian building that are changing their rules on Dufferin and Lawrence. But all these buildings you're able to apply to, right? Except for the senior buildings if you're not of age, right? But all those are open for you to apply for, right? And it's another ideal for you to not just think they're all government housing or they're all Toronto community housing and in one area, right? For housing connections, access to housing, in Toronto itself, there's 15 zones, 15 different zones that cover from the west end all the way to the east. Scarborough, Victoria Park, McCowan, very far end Scarborough, where people don't know, you know, or downtown Queensway. So there's over 400 buildings, building preferences you can choose from in your application. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. What should tenants know about rental increases for their units?
So rental increases happen on 3 occasions, right? Rental increases happens once a year, right? It happens, it can happen if your landlord gives you 90 days notice with a board note, or it can happen because, well, the province is going to tell you that the rental increase, the guideline has changed, but usually that won't happen until the new calendar year. There's no rental increase should happen more than once in a year. Absolutely not. And if it does, you should seek legal advice.